Welcome to this next video where we are going through the tutorial for Godot. We have so far gone through these first few sections and we are currently up to creating the enemy. So if you are not at that point, you might need to go back and watch some of the previous videos. As we have already done some of this work before, the instructions are now starting to be a little bit more simple in the sense that they're asking you to already know certain things. So here when we're creating the enemy, it has told us a number of different nodes that we're going to need to create, but it's not going through the exact method of adding those nodes in because you should already have some experience here. So let's quickly go through and create this new set of nodes. So the first thing is a rigid body. So let's start a new scene first of all. And that scene we will use other node and it's going to be a rigid body 2D. So I'm just typing that in. And you can see it needs to be renamed to be mob. So let's rename that quickly. Making sure we use the right capitalizations, otherwise things will get confused later on. We need to have 3 children of that rigid body: the animated sprite 2D, the collision shape 2D, and the visible on-screen notifier. None of those need to be renamed, so let's add those in now. So we have an animated sprite 2D. I'm using the favorites or the recent that I've had before because I obviously have used these earlier. So I'm just adding them in, and I haven't ever had this visible on-screen notifier, so I'll search for that one now. Make sure it's the notifier, not the enabler. And also don't make the mistake I just did of making it a child of something else, and if you do, we should know that we can just reorder them so that they are there. Now if we're just trying to make it exactly the same as the order on the instructions, that means we'll actually put this at the bottom. So we've got our animated sprite, our collision shape, and then our visible on-screen notifier. Let's go and set some properties. So in the rigid body, which we have renamed to be mob, we need to set the gravity scale. So let's choose that rigid body. Let's go and find that in the inspector, and we're looking for the gravity scale, which we need to set to 0. That makes sure it doesn't fall down. Now under the collision object 2D, we need to go and uncheck the 1 inside the mask property. Now we haven't done a lot of work in these before, but let's have a look anyway. So that is in the collision objects. Here it is. Let's find that section. Not the lining mask, sorry, in the process. I've forgotten where it is. Let's open all of them up until we find the one that we're looking for. And of course, I'm trying to skim through this quickly and I didn't read it carefully. We are still obviously in the rigid body, so I need to come back to the rigid body, and there is the collision object 2D, just like the picture. And if I expand out collision, this is what we're looking for here. So we're trying to turn off this number 1 in the mask. We'll talk more about that a little bit later on. Now we're going to set up the sprite. So again, like we did earlier, we're going to go to the animated sprite. We're going to say that we need a new set of animations, which will give us that there. Double click on it to open them up. We're going to need 3 animations: a fly, a swim, and a walk. So let's just rename the default there to be fly. Let's add in, and again it keeps doing that, so we'll just remember we can click on it again. Fly, we'll add this one to be swim, and one more which we'll call walk. Okay, it does say to adjust all of these 3 to have a speed of 3 frames per second. The default is 5, so let's make sure that these all have a speed of 3. It should by default, no, there we go, change that one. So just double check each of them, they are all looking good so far. And now we will bring in the images. So again, if we come to our art that we have from earlier, we're again lucky that these have already been renamed to something that makes a bit of sense. So let's start with our fly and bring in the 2 images for flying, swimming, bring in the 2 for swimming, and walking. We will bring those 2 in as well. And then it says that we would like to scale them to 0.75 each. So again, let's have a look over here to the transform and scale. if we keep the lock together for being the same amount, we'll keep that nicely and just make sure that applies to all three, which it does. Okay, and then also, as we did in the player, we're going to add a capsule shape to these. So let's go into our mob. Let's look at it in a 2D space. So let's click the 2D up the top if you need to, so you can see what it looks like. And we will also then add in our collision shape. Needs to have a capsule, we said. And then it does, so we want to rotate that capsule 90 degrees, because you can see our sprite is actually facing that way. So let's also do that. Let's come in with the collision shape chosen. After adding the capsule in, come down to rotation, and I'm just going to type 90 degrees in there. And then if I zoom in a little bit, you'll see that I can adjust my capsule in the way that fits this shape a bit better. So let's just go with that for the moment. And finally, let's save our scene at this point. So save scene, and again we'll put a capital M in here for mob just to keep things consistent. So far we've done all the setup and the visuals of this enemy. We now need to add a script. So just like before, let's go to the mob and add a script in. We can leave everything as it is by default, that's fine. And let's have a look what it has. So it already extends the rigid body, and what I might do is just delete all this, and I'm going to copy and paste it from the tutorial. And the main reason I'm doing that is hopefully I will stop running into the problems of spacing that we have seen earlier. We now need our ready functions. Remember, this is what happens as soon as the object is ready to play in the game. So it is setting up a variable called mob types, and it is finding out all the different animations that we have, and then it is basically choosing one of those animations randomly. So that's how we can get essentially different enemies out of the three that we have. So you can read that in more detail in this part of the instructions. Then let's add in the next function. So we'll bring this underneath, and that, oops, didn't paste in, there we go. So this is now using our on visibility. Okay, we actually need to do that with a signal, sorry. So let's go to signals, and we need the screen exited signal. So let's make sure we're on the visible screen notifier, onto signals, and we're looking for the screen exited, and that is going to link to this node, or sorry, this function which we already had copied in just a moment ago. So there we go, we can see that. So again, as this enemy is going to come off the screen, we're going to be notified via a signal, and at the moment it's freeing it from the queue, basically removing it from our game. And that is the scene for the enemies at the moment. So we'll look at adding those into the game in just a moment, but make sure, of course, that you save your scene. Let's move across and have a look at the next section. So here we have the main game beginning. Okay, so this is where we're going to bring together the mobs, which are our enemies, the player that we've created so far, and try and bring them into something that actually starts playing as a game. So again, let's create a new scene, and that is going to be called main, and we're just going to use a node 2D as a pretty basic node at this point. So scene, new scene, we will just call it a node 2D, which we've already got there, and we will rename that to be main to match in with our instructions over capitalizations. Now we're going to add in our player. So you can click on this instance button, or you can even find your player scene down here in the list of files and drag it in, but I'll follow instructions and use the instance button there, and you can see it's found the only two scenes available to me, and that is going to be the player. So let's add one of those in. Okay, so we've added the player that we've been working on as now a node within the main game. We also need to now add in some extra things. Okay, so we need a timer, in fact 3 timers, and a marker 2D, and you can see that they also get renamed. So let's make sure that we do each of those. So add it in, again make sure we've got main chosen first. We want to add in a timer, and in fact we want 3 of those. So let's just go 1, We'll use it from our recents, and then not as a child, sorry. Make sure we fix that up. And one more thing we want was this new thing called a marker 2D. So we'll search for that. Marker 2D. Okay, let's go through and rename them. So we've got the first timer is going to be mob timer. I assume that's going to be controlling the enemies coming in since they were called mobs. We want a score timer. And final timer we want is a start timer. Don't forget your capitalizations correctly. And your marker 2D is being renamed to be start position. Okay, so let's get those all renamed properly. Then it says for the timers, set their wait time. So the mob timer over here in the inspector, its wait time is 0.5. The score timer is going to be 1, so it already is, and the start timer is going to be 2 seconds. So make sure they're all set. We also want to turn the one-shot property of the start timer to on. So let's do that start timer. Its one shot should be ticked. And finally, the position of the start position node to be these coordinates. So our start position, let's go with the position. So it's in the transform section. And we want the X value is always first, that's 240. And the Y position is second, 450. So those are all set up. We're now going to be looking at how we can bring in the enemies into here. So again, our main node is going to be what's creating the enemies, okay? And we're going to first of all add a path that we're going to be using in an interesting way. So let's add in this path 2D. So as a child of main, add in this new node which we haven't used. It's a path 2D. So not a path follower, make sure you get the right one. It's a path 2D. And we're going to rename that to mob path. Oops, make sure you get your caps right as well. Okay. Now, when we again go into the 2D view and we choose our mob path as the thing that we're working on, we can go around, we get these new options here, so they actually come at the top, and we're going to set some positions. And this little sort of GIF here shows a position. So basically I'm going to click in the top left corner as the start of our path, the top right, the bottom right, and then the bottom left. At that point we're going to click the close path, so we don't click back on one, we just close path, and it always takes the direct path back, which will be straight up this left hand side. So let's have a go at that. We're going to add in a new point, sorry, with this plus here. So let's start from here. Then we're going to do that corner, and you can see the line coming in, that corner, and then we can just say close path, which is here, or close curve, and you can see it shot that last line straight up the left side. So this is a path around the edge of our gameplay area, and we're going to be using something in just a second that's going to follow that path around, and then we're randomly going to be picking a point as it goes around to give at least the appearance of the enemies coming from all sorts of random directions. You'll see what that looks like quite soon. So now we do need to add a path follower. And make sure it is a child of the path that we just created. So unlike before where we clicked main before we added in any new nodes, this time we want the mob path chosen. So let's add that in, and because it was the last thing I searched, it's still there, we'll choose a path follower. So that's the sort of virtual thing that's going to be flying around this path that we're going to use as our location. And don't forget to rename it. So it is going to be mob spawn location. There we go, make sure I spell it correctly. Okay, so we can see our scene is looking the same as the scene over here. I'm pretty happy with that so far. It is time for some scripting. So again, let's go to our main, let's add a script in and say create. And as before, I'm just going to delete everything so that we can follow exactly what's here. So let's first of all copy this part in. So it's extending the node, that's fine. We're exporting a variable, which is a new thing called a pack scene. You can read more about that on here. In short, it's going to be representing a scene of the player. So it's a way of sort of preloading in that player's, oh, sorry, not player, the mob scene, sorry, the enemy, so that we can use it to create them later on. Instead of loading it each time, it's sort of a pre-temporary loaded, but that'll make a bit more sense if you read the instructions here. Let's have a look what else we need to do. So we're going to now go back to our script. So if we come here, you can now see, because we use that export, we have a scene option over here called mob scene, and we can now take our mob scene from our file list and we can drag that in here as an option. So it's basically preloading in that scene. Right, let's now create an instance of player under the main. So let's have a look what it wants us to do. So let's choose the player, okay, under the scene, the node doc, here we go, and we want to do something with the hit, okay, so we're looking for the hit signal, so we're going to hit that chooser and connect it to the on-player hit. That is fine, but we don't actually want to call it that. Sorry, my apologies. We want to call it game over. So again, this is the problem with trying to skim this at the same time as recording. Make sure you are reading carefully to make sure you get everything correct. So we actually want to call this game over. Press the connect and you'll see we've created a function called game over with that signal being passed to it. If we come down here and have a look, we have some code which I'm going to copy in. Okay, and I'm just going to quickly take this bit of code out and replace it in the game over that we created. We don't want to have two functions the same though. And we've got this function new game. Now again, I've run back into the problem of the tabs, so I'm going to quickly fix that as we've done before by backspacing it to the line before and just pressing enter so that it goes and uses the correct indentation. It's just one of those things you just have to do sometimes. So we have our game over, which is going to stop our timer for the mob and the score, and that's obviously being used by that signal. And we've got this new game one where we start our score at 0, and this is setting our position of our player using that start position node that we created over here earlier, and also starts this timer that's going to start the game. So now we have to come over here and connect the timeout signals of each of our three timers. So what I might do is quickly copy this in first, the new code, because it's going to be those functions. Okay, and fix the spacing, the indentation, sorry. If anyone comes across a better way to do this, please let me know, because it is something I've not found a better solution to. So let's have a look. For our first timer, the start timer, we will go, let's have a look at that. Okay, so if we go here, we've got the timeout. We're going to connect that one, and just if we use the name that's already there, it's going to link in with one of those. There it is. And then we want to use our score timer. So again, let's do its timeout, link it to the one that's already here. So you see that just came up there. And the last thing, the mob timer, is going to do something different. So let's have a look. Here is the mob timeout. So again, let's quickly copy that. I'll see if I can do it this way. That might be better. Might mean I don't have to copy the code. Nope, it's still done it. So here we go, backspacing again. And we'll quickly get this to something that's not going to give us errors. And there we go, that is now good. And finally, we want that mob timer. So let's connect its timeout. And again, because we just copied the function already in, it's using the same name, so it's going to link into there. So that is all of our timers now having something to do when they run out, when the time is up. Again, please read through this in more detail for what exactly it's doing. We are now ready, however, to test the game. It's still not fully functional. We don't have our score being kept. We don't have a start button and those sort of things. But in theory, if we haven't made any other mistakes, we should get our player on the screen. We should see some enemies start to come up. We should be able to move around. And if we do hit an enemy, we will die, i.e. the player will disappear, but we won't have any options to start a new game, etc. So for now, we have to temporarily add the new game call into our ready. So if we come back up the very top, we need to add that in. So let's copy that whole function in, and it should usually be up the top. And again, I'll probably have to fix the errors on that. Let's have a look. Yep, that's better. So now, as soon as the main starts and is ready to begin, it's going to call new game. New game, of course, is down here, and it creates a score of 0, gets a player going, and starts the start timer. When the start timer goes off, all right, it comes down to here. It starts the mob, so this is the one that's controlling when the enemies get created. Oh, we seem to be missing something there. Let's have a quick look. What did we miss? Oh, the score timer starts. So let's fix that up, because that would definitely give us an error in a second. So that starts our scoring. And then the mob timer, this is all about creating the actual enemy on the screen. So let's give this a go. Make sure we save. So everything should be saved. Oh, we haven't saved this at all yet. So save scene. Call it main with a capital main. Good. And let's try running that scene. So there is our player, which we can move around. We are seeing enemies come on the screen, which is great. They're going off the screen. Now we are getting a score, and I just died. But as you said, there's no score showing up. There's no restart buttons, etc. But in theory, the gameplay is there. There's one more thing that it does suggest that we do here, which is to now set up the main scene for our game. So instead of having to test individual scenes, we'll be able to use the main play button. So we do that if we just press the main play button for the first time. It says, hey, we don't know which scene to run first, and we can just say select and then choose, in this case, main scene. That would be the one we would want to begin. So you can see now when we start the game, the main scene gets run. So anytime now we want to just test out the game, we can do that by pressing the main play button, not just the scene play button. Okay, so we'll leave that there for now. Again, you need to read through these carefully. This is just a really quick video visual about how to put it into the program, but you do need to read through each of these sections to try and understand what the commands are doing. It's not really just a copy and paste exercise, so make sure you are reading and asking questions if you're not understanding something.